Welcome back to Real House DIY. Today we're talking about rough electrical inspection and what to expect. So first you see we have some old work here and we have some new electrical work. I'll talk about what to expect if you have questions from the inspector about what to do with the old work later on. First thing, you're going to start with your permit. Now you don't have to go into great detail with the permit. I just said have a small addition, adding 15 amp circuit for lights and outlets, and that was it. If they have any questions for you, they'll get in touch. Now I did have some questions before I even started for the building official in regards to the inspection schedule. He said basically the rough electrical inspection can be done at the same time as the framing inspection. I scheduled the two at the same time, but they still sent two different people, 2 different times. And then rough electrical inspection is going to be before insulation, an insulation inspection. So even this is an interior wall, but I also have some exterior walls in this project. So I had the rough electrical inspection before insulation went in. Make sure you know which version of the NEC electrical code your town is using, if they're still using the 2017 or if they've adopted the latest version. Read through that a few times. Anytime you're questioning distance for securing wires, that type of thing, you can look it up and get the answer. Now I've found for the rough electrical inspection, the inspector is mostly going to be focusing on what's going to get covered up, such as this getting covered up by drywall. So he's going to be looking at the wiring here, staples, the spacing with the wire in the 2x4, and actually not so much looking at anything that's even going inside the box here, even though final inspection, your outlets are going to be on, your light switches and the covers. I guess if the inspector really wants to see anything in here, you can take the cover off and look inside. Still, I always get the box ready to go as if I'm ready to just get an outlet or a light switch right on here. That includes the wire nuts with pigtails, correct spacing, the sheathing from the Romex wire stripped back to the correct location in the box. So this is all ready to go, and I can go and put an outlet on here anytime. So if the inspector wanted to see anything in here, you can measure the length of the wires, that type of thing. Maybe looking at the spacing here, you want the 1.25 inch either side of a 2x4, so you have a bit of space here to work with. Just aim for the center of the 2x4. These were old holes, I was able to reuse them here. You'll want your staples securing the wire centered in the wall, correct spacing, and if you have a wire going full length of the wall, you want that correct spacing for the staples as well. Where you have wires secured with staples, inspector's going to want to see them secure but not crushed. Always better to not nail them in as much as you think you need, and then you can go back and nail them in just a tiny bit more if you need to. One thing my inspector hates to see, if you have wires stapled alongside each other on the wall here, even if you're within 1.25 inches per code, he doesn't like to see that. He makes me change it. It's always better to get it even more centered, wires on top of each other. You can staple 2 together. If you have even more wires here, you can use the larger staples, or my inspector always recommends these to me. Multi-cable staples. Looks like that. So you can put, I think, as much as 8 wires in here. The 14 gauge. You can replace the nail with a screw if you like. And then this snaps closed to secure your wires. Based on the size of the staple, you can look up exactly how many wires you can safely secure under each of these kind of staples. And just like the staples, you have different types of wire nuts that are meant to hold different types of wire, different sizes of wires, and numbers of wires. And it says right on the side of the box exactly how many you can safely put together. Inspector will also check to see that you have proper air sealing for wires going up to the ceiling. Prefers to like to see it from below, but if you sprayed it up above, hopefully if the ceiling's still open, he can check from above that way. But ideally you want want to see that spray foam from below. As for this old wiring work, I specifically asked my inspector while I was here, what do I do with that? Said, places like here, this wire was missing the staple securing it. That's easy enough to fix. Do the best you can. Don't worry about having to rewire anything or drilling new holes. Here's an example. Previous owner installed some under cabinet lights in the kitchen, so the wire was fished through the wall, and this is kind of tight. It's not even enough room to get this over to secure it to the wall. He said just leave it, that's fine. Similar story here. Had some spray foam missing for sealing the wires going down to the basement. Moving on to the basement for this new circuit, where you have the wire come down from the mudroom. Inspector's going to be looking for spacing for the staples. Also, where you're going through a joist, same thing, you want to be 1.25 inches up if you're drilling a hole through. Do not want to staple any wires to the bottom of the joists. So finally, for the new circuit, before turning on, good practice, you leave it in the off position with a piece of tape over it, so no one will inadvertently say, oh, this circuit's off, it's supposed to be on, switch it on. An inspector may or may not even look at the circuit box during the rough electrical. Sometimes they've waited until the final for me. There's just some notes here for where you have the new breaker. You do want to write down which room that's for. He will be looking for that. And he will be prepared to, with a screwdriver to remove the panel here and check the wiring underneath. So we'll do that now. So panel off, inspector is going to be looking for neat wiring. You don't want to mess of wires, stuff crossing back and forth. Everything nice and flat up the sides. And really the only other thing that my inspector has ever noted, these circuit breakers for screwing down the wires per the manufacturer, for the box or the breaker, there's certain torque that you need to screw these wires down to. Now, anytime I've had an actual electrician doing work, I've never seen him actually torque these down properly. I go back later on and check these, and some of them are just hand tight, so it's definitely something to go back and check. So I just use my inch-pound torque wrench, which I use for car work. It works just as well as a torque screwdriver. Get those torques to the proper specs. My inspector has never actually checked the torque on any of these before, but he has asked the question, did I torque it per the manufacturer instructions? Now, a good question to ask your inspector while he's here for the rough electrical is when you can actually turn this breaker on. You might want to wait until after the final inspection's done. My inspector lets me switch this on after I get the outlets, lights, light fixtures, switches, all that stuff done. As soon as it's done, he lets me turn that on before the final is done. Now at the top or sides of your circuit breaker panel, inspector may check to see if the wires are being secured properly where they enter the panel. Now I found for minor things, maybe you have the wires side by side and they need to be stapled together, or you use the wrong size staple, or you have some wires that are close to the edge and you need a nail protection plate there. All those kind of minor corrections. I found my inspector, he's going to pass you, but he says make sure you make this change. I always say, okay, yeah, I'll make it. I'll even take pictures of it, make sure, just in case there's questions in the future, to have that on hand. Last thing to note, while your inspector is here for the rough electrical inspection, that is the best time to ask him questions, as opposed to, reading an email or talking on the phone. While he's here, you can see the actual project and what's going on, give you really good answers to your questions. The actual inspection goes pretty fast, and then use that extra time, have a list of questions prepared, and get those questions answered.